I want to introduce you to some people and talk about something that is sort of unique in our family. You have heard me talk about Cookie Monday, I know, in the past, but I was thinking this week, I wanted to give you the roots of Cookie Monday. Where does Cookie Monday come from? So with that in mind, I want to invite my wife, Patty, and my daughter, Kirsten, Danny's wife, Kirsten, my daughter, Kirsten Kuhn, and Patty Warman. If you guys would come on up, and I want to talk to you about, I want to have them discuss with you a little bit about how we got, I won't touch that, we'll just share one microphone. Come on down. Here's your microphone.
Do you want us to introduce ourselves?
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself, just in case people are confused about who you are.
That was a joke. I was kidding.
Yeah.
As he said, I am Kirsten, Danny's wife, no more, no less. This is my mom, Patty.
There you
Mike's
go.
wife, no more, no less.
There you go. It's all good.
Welcome
it's
to
all
2024.
Good. All right. So I want to take you back in time. How far back are we going when you were in Zumwalt West High School on the cheer squad?
Just a few years ago.
Just a couple
Not
years ago?
long.
Yeah,
No,
okay. All right.
I was just in high school not too long
just
ago.
not too long ago.
Like 2005.
Yeah. Was it really that long?
That's when I was a freshman, yeah.
Hang on a second. Paige, how long has it been? Been a while?
Fact
Yeah,
check
okay.
me.
All right. So Kirsten's part of the cheer team, right? And here's how I remember, but you guys correct me.
This will be fun.
Yeah. Often after a basketball game or football game on a Friday night, you might come over with friends, right? The house would be full of people, and never like at 6 or 7. It was always after a game, okay? And sometimes during those times, Patty would get out the mixing bowl and begin, and just went away. Patty get out the mixing bowl and begin to make cookies.
What's more important is the love spoon.
Was what?
The teaspoon that she would use
Okay.
has the word love on it. So she would tell people the reason they were so good is because they were made with love.
Are you serious? I don't remember that part.
We're here for the details.
Okay. I just remember feeling like, all right, here comes everybody. You'd start getting the batter out, and it would be 9:30, 10 o'clock, and you're making chocolate chip cookies, right?
It also started when...
Use the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Do you remember when you had practice at 4 in the afternoon, but school ended at like 2:20? Because their coach, their freshman year, was an elementary teacher at another building over here at Twin Chimneys. Oh, yeah. So I would bring, the first time I started with cookies with I called them the baby jaguars, I took a couple buckets of cookies and a gallon of milk up to school so that they had something to eat. In between school and practice, yeah.
Okay.
The gallon of milk sticks out because that was a nice detail.
Seriously, so you took a gallon of milk and maybe a tub of cookies.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Sometimes they'd come over for chicken nuggets also before,
All right.
in between.
Now, it got to be such a thing, though. Mama Warman's cookies. Is that what they were called? Mama Warman's cookies?
Yeah.
Okay. Mama Warman's cookies were such a thing that at your wedding, what did we do for one of the tables at your wedding?
So I actually did corroborate this with another friend from high school. It was they all had, that table where all my high school friends were,
Yep.
had cookies and milk, right? They were both there, so they can also
Okay.
confirm they had cookies and milk at their wedding table.
Okay, but that was the only table with cookies and milk,
Yeah.
right? Because they were your friends. Because
So otherwise it'd be weird.
yeah. And I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know when the last wedding was you had chocolate chip cookies at the table, right? Just make a connection
Hence,
here, because
it
that
would
was a
be
big
weird.
deal, right? That we made, that was for your friends, and it had been kind of a thing through high school that whenever you came over, or often when you came over, Mom had chocolate chip cookies good to go. Okay, all right. Now, so then we get Joe through high school, right? And that's a whole other story we don't have time for. But Casey comes along, and come on, I want to introduce Casey.
Casey
This
Ryan's-
is not the Warman show, but you're going to see the connection I'm going to make here. Yeah, Gilbert. This is Casey Gilbert. This is Ryan's wife, my daughter. Okay. Ryan's wife, my daughter. All right. Did I get that?
sister.
And Kirsten's
Kirsten's
sister.
sister.
Mom's daughter. Okay. All right. You see the connection. It's a family thing here. Okay. All right. Now, Zumwalt West, senior year, You decide to start making chocolate chip cookies on Monday.
Yes.
Use the mic.
Yes.
Let's just go back. Why do you remember it all, like the first time you did it, like what was going through, like why you did it?
Yes. So I had a case of the Sunday scaries, as I call them, Sunday evening, and you're like dreading Monday morning, don't want to go to school. Now it's just work, because I still get them. And in high school, sometimes you would just be carrying around like a bucket of food because like your 6th hour was having a celebration, a food day, so everyone brought in snacks. So it wasn't like unheard of that you would just have food with you. But it was always a nice surprise if a friend of yours had like a bucket of food because you were like, hey, can I have one of those? It was a nice surprise. And so Sunday night scaries, I was like, well, tomorrow is really going to be a bummer, but Mondays are less of a bummer if I have chocolate chip cookies. So if I feel that way, maybe other people feel that way, maybe someone else wants a chocolate chip cookie.
So it was like first or second week it was in September. If I'm not mistaken, you started,
Sure.
right? And you just made a batch of chocolate chip cookies to take with you on that Monday.
Yes.
How did it go giving them out? What were people's response? Would you remember?
Mostly confusion, because they would ask me, like, hey, what are the cookies for?
Okay.
And I would say, no reason, I just have them. Do you want one?
Okay. And people rarely told you no?
Correct.
Yeah, everybody. Okay. So this thing progresses, and we go from one container to a bigger container, right? At some point there in October, I remember October, early November, you start taking multiple containers
Yes.
of chocolate chip cookies.
Yes.
Right? Now, why?
It grew. Exactly. Yeah. So it just, as the weeks continued, and on Mondays I always had cookies. It just became. I would walk into a class and just put them on the front table or put them on my desk and say, hey, if anyone wants a cookie, here they are. And then
Did people
by
begin
third
to
hour,
seek
I
you
was out.
Did you find that people began to look for you?
Yeah, somewhat. Or like
Okay.
I'd walk into a room and they'd be like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for my cookie.
Okay, fair
Type
enough.
of thing.
All right. But it also means it grew from one batch to at least multiple batches.
Yeah, I
Fair?
think by the end of the year I was doing like a 4-batch.
4 batches of chocolate chip
Quadruple
cookies,
batch.
which
But
is
sorry
like,
for the
we were
grocery
trying to do
bill,
the math.
by the
It's
way.
got to be, we made 100 cookies for this morning with double batch, so that's got to be a couple hundred cookies that you were taking.
Yeah.
The thing that I thought was sort of humorous for Casey, now, all right, so as this thing progresses, you began to single out then and have one batch. Do you remember this? You had one batch that you held on to the last hour.
Yes, so I would put a small box together for the very last hour of the day. It was a very small class. I think there was only like 10 students in it. But for a couple weeks in a row, I'd get to 7th hour and my cookie box would be empty, and I would feel really bad because it's like a small group of kids, so it's weird if you're like, hey, sorry, there's none.
You're out. Tough luck.
So
right?
yeah, I'd do like a small box and I'd drop it off in that class so that they were saved for 7th hour.
Okay. And again, as I recall, for all of you guys, one of the driving forces was people like chocolate chip cookies, and this is just something nice that we can do for people, right? I mean, that was sort of what drove it, if that makes sense.
Well, I never made cookies.
No,
but
you didn't. No, Kirsten
It
never made
skipped
cookies.
me, but I did provide the vessel for people to get cookies. You brought their friends. Oh, here's my cookie.
But
I still didn't make cookies.
Kirsten doesn't bake, but she designs. And so if we move through the years a little bit, one of the things that happened was Kirsten designed a shirt that just says, if you can't read it, says, is it helpful or hurtful? And this came from where, Patty? Where did this come from? Do you recall the phrase? Yeah, where did the phrase come from?
It came from Ephesians 4, is it 32 or 39? I forget. 32. It's a verse that says, don't let any corrupt communication come out of your mouth, but only that's good for building each other's up. Yeah, so it may benefit those who listen. Kirsten knows it. I had my girls memorize it because I know that saying difficult things and gossipy is just inbred in all of us humans. And when I was a high school student, we had a youth group event called the Mickey Mouth Party. And it was Mickey Mouse themed, but everything was about the mouth, and we had to learn that verse as part of our event that night, so that stuck with me. I passed it on to our kids.
It
To
was,
be fair, I had to learn that because I was mean to my brother. So
Yeah,
it
that's true.
wasn't
That's
just
true.
out
That's
of
true.
pastor's kids are really great.
There is out there a picture of Kirsten designed that shirt for Arch Apparel, and there's a picture out there with Patty taking chocolate chip cookies into Arch Apparel, right? It's sort of like at
That's
one of
right,
the
I forgot
early
about that.
early days of the launch or whatever, wearing
Yeah.
the shirt and just kind of like, so chocolate chip cookies have been a part of our family for a long time in the effort to just try and make people's worlds a little better. Thank you for humoring me and coming up here this morning. Yes. Nelson, come here, man. Ryan, come here. Hey, Jason, come here, man. Just, no, you can't. No, you really can't. But you can hand them out. Just if you'd like a chocolate chip cookie, fresh made last night, help yourself. I think there's 100 in there, so if you want a couple, feel free to grab them. Did you?
Yeah, you did. You gave one to everyone.
I had chocolate chip cookies made, didn't I? In honor of chocolate chip, of Cookie Monday. Here's what I want you to understand this morning. When you do good, you honor Jesus and you help other people. And what I want to see this morning is I honestly believe in my heart of hearts, doing good for others, I'm going to say it a couple times, doing good for others is easy to do, and it's easy for you to miss. Doing good for other people is not hard. It's very easy, not complicated, for you to live a life that does good for other people. But it's easy for you to miss it. When someone does something good to you, it's easy for you to dismiss it, not think anything of it, go right past you. I'm also going to say this to you. Doing good for others is hard, because one of the things that you will have to do in order to do good for others is get your eyes off yourself and see other people, and that is hard for a good many people to do. And that doesn't make you a bad person, but it does mean that you tend to see the world in a mirror that reflects back on you. And if you're going to be a person that goes about doing good, you need to see through a glass that allows you to see the people around you. You need to replace the mirror with a glass. And the Bible talks a lot about doing good, but somewhere along the way, doing good has become something that we're like, oh yeah, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? That's cool. And we use it in ways that I think diminish it, like that was a good movie. Oh yeah, that was a good game. Oh, those are like really good shoes. That's really good food. That's a really good restaurant. Hey, you see somebody even do stupid things, but have you ever heard this expression? Sometimes it's a little kid, sometimes it's a big kid, and they'll do something stupid, and we'll say, but they have a good heart. We dismiss the action and say, they got a good heart. And what it's become is like this sense in which, as long as we feel like we're a good person on the inside, then like that's the thumbs up. And you can be a jerk to other people, and you can be callous to what's going on around you, but you're a good person, right? You're not a bad person, because bad people do bad things, like kill people. But if you lie, but you lie for the right reasons, that makes you okay, right? Isn't it okay to tell a white lie? Isn't that acceptable? It's okay to, like, protect your self-interest, right? We've diluted what the word and the idea of living a good life looks like. Open your Bibles to 2 Peter chapter 1. And I want us to, we're in a series we're doing called Secret Sauce and the not so secret way of living for Jesus. So last week in verse 1, 2 Peter 1, Peter wrote the book, called himself a servant and an apostle, but the first thing he didn't hang on to was like, hey, look at me, I'm an apostle. It was, I'm a servant, I'm a slave, I'm a deacon. That's what the word means. I am a doulos. I am the one who is told by others what to do. I'm that guy, and I'm writing to the people through the righteousness of God our Savior, Jesus Christ, who've received a faith as precious as ours. He's writing to Christians. He says, grace and peace be yours through the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord. And then we saw last week that Jesus has given us everything that we need to live a life pleasing to Him. And I'm going to jump on down to verse 5. And he says, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness. First thing he says, make every effort to add to your faith goodness. Now, what I want us to understand is he's writing to a group of people that was living in what I called really dark days. They were living under Nero. Nero rose to power because if I read my history correctly, because I just Googled, well, how did Nero become emperor? Nero's mom poisoned dad, killed him, and when that happened, Nero at age 17 was promoted king. Not sure many 17-year-olds can run a kingdom, right? But man, as he grew, he became then, and history records that Nero was just a ruthless dictator. Had his mom killed, which I thought was an interesting act of karma. Had his top trusted advisor committed suicide because of what was happening. Nero had other relatives put to death. And then when Rome caught fire, history records that Nero blamed Christians for causing this, that it was this new Christian sect that was causing this chaos in culture, and he started having believers killed for no other reason than they were Christians. So here's a picture of the lions that was happening. History records that Nero took Christians and impaled them on sticks and set them on fire, and that's how he lit his garden, for simply being believers, followers of Jesus. So to this group of people in the early 60s, Peter's writing, and he's saying, man, a little bit later he says, don't let this suffering that you're undergoing like shake your faith, like your faith is bigger than what you're seeing. The way you respond to treatment and injustice because they were experiencing it. Trust God. Stay with Jesus. If I'm not mistaken, Nero had Peter put to death. That's how he died. He didn't die in old age, didn't die of some disease. He was killed at the hands of Nero for proclaiming Christ. And to this group of people, he's writing and saying, look, you've got a faith. Now here are some things that you need to, and he says there add, NIV says add. I liken it to the sense that maybe what he was talking about was not add like mixing bowl, making chocolate chip cookies, I'm dumping stuff in, I'm going to stir it all up, I'm going to end up with a faith. I don't think that's it. I think what he's talking about is you have a foundation of faith in Christ. And then you're going to build on it. You're going to add these blocks. He's going to describe what are the characteristics, what are the traits that should, like followers of Jesus, be evident of. What should it look like? And the first thing he says is, to your faith, add goodness. I want you to note that, hang on here if we can do this. If we can do this. Jesus gives us everything we need for genuine faith. That's the first thing in your outline. So we're not talking about like, okay, having a trust in Jesus isn't enough. I get to heaven by simple confidence in who Jesus is and willingness to follow him. I trust him as my Savior. I realize that I really have messed up. I'm a broken person. I'm in need of someone who says he was God, who died on the cross on the third day. And hear me, my faith doesn't rest on Good Friday and the crucifixion. Your faith doesn't rest on Good Friday. Your faith rests on Easter Sunday. Because if Jesus is still in the ground somewhere, let's just say somebody messed it up, and Jesus is still dead, your faith is worthless. You might be a little bit better person, you might do a little bit nicer things, but who cares? You've been fooled. And really, some would say you are foolish. You are an idiot. It is that strong that Paul said to the person that if Jesus is in the ground, Jesus didn't rise on Easter Sunday, there's nothing to this. That's how big a deal the resurrection is. That's why you hang your hat not on Jesus dying, because everybody gets that Jesus died. The dividing point is this: is Jesus alive today? Did he rise from the dead? That is it. That is like, because if he didn't, who cares? Seriously, who cares? But think about the implications. If Christ rose from the dead, if the dead man rose again, what does that mean? It means everything Jesus said who he was is true. And he said he was the Son of God. He said he came to put God on display. Emmanuel means what? Say it out loud. God with us. That's what Emmanuel means. Is it true that God walked among us or not? If the resurrection is true, that means that Jesus said you can have forgiveness. Some of you this morning, even in a crowd not this big, are dealing with guilt. You've not moved forward in your life because you feel guilty. You've got something in your past that still is tripping you up. You've not released it because you really think it's too big to be forgiven for. What if it's possible it could be erased, it could be gone, it's not going to be held against you? What would you give for that? That's what Christ offers. He says, I have come that you might be forgiven. We rub shoulders with people who are guilty, and they're hurting from it. And we have a solution to the guilt, but we stay silent. We have a remedy for what's aching their soul, and we don't talk about him. So Jesus said, if the resurrection, to me that's like the big deal. Like he rose, boom, all bets are off. I have relationship with the Father. I have assurance of going to heaven. I have power to live life here. I don't have to. I get what happened. I watched the news last night too. I get it. We all watched it, right? And I get there's an anger out there right now. And I saw the anger expressed last night, and it caught me on one of the last clips that I saw when they were moving the ex-president into the vehicle, and a guy stuck up his middle finger in the camera. It's out there. You'll see it. And what is he expressing? A rage. An anger. People are taking your country from you, and I'm ticked about it. And F you. Do we have to live that way? So I'm asking you, because I don't know how you feel. Do you have to live with a burning rage? Do you have to live in fear that God isn't in control? That you can't trust him, that he's not big enough to deal with this? Because there are countless millions, I'm going to say, of people who feel anger, disappointment, hurt. And Christ said, I came to show you a better way. I came to show you a different kingdom. And probably, much like Peter was trying to say to those believers under Nero, there's another way to live. But you got to decide which way you want to live. You got to decide which direction you think this thing's going. You got to decide where your hope is. Jesus has given us everything we need to live by faith, by trusting him, by confidence in him. And so then he says, add to your faith goodness. And the first thing I want to tell you, no one is saved by being good. This is not a case of like, okay, well, if I do enough good things, and here's just a simple question I have for you, because there may be some of you here today. Here's how you know if you're trying to get to heaven by doing what you do. Ask somebody this question. I'm going to ask you. I don't want your answer, but I want you to be honest about the first thing that comes into your head. Hey, I come to you and I honestly want to know, I hear you go to church. Hey, you go to Stonebridge? Yeah, I go. I say, oh, man, you guys talk about Jesus? Yeah. You guys talk about getting to heaven? Yeah. How do I get to heaven? Now, you just answered that in your head. How do I get to heaven? How do you get there? And if your answer goes along the path anywhere along about what you have to do, well, got to be a good person, got to go to church, got to give money, got to get baptized, got to become a member, got to donate your time, and you start listening to goddess, you know what you just told me? You believe getting to heaven is based on your goodness. That's what you've just told me without telling me. You believe it's how you act that gets you to heaven. And here's my only pushback against that. If you honestly believe that heaven is about you earning it by your goodness, I would just, hear my heart, I would ask you, well, how good do you have to be? Isn't that fair? You have to be Mother Teresa good? Can you be the thief on the cross good? Where in between? How good do you have to be to get to heaven? You think it. I'm just asking you where the line falls. If it's on your goodness. And if you would all think that way, out in the lobby we have a book by Andy Stanley that simply the title is this, and he does a great job. It's not a very thick book, easy read. How good do you have to be? If heaven's about being good, how good do you have to be? Because you need to answer that question, because here's my great fear for you. If heaven is 100 earned acts, hear me, I'm making a number up, because that's what you're doing. You don't know. You don't know how good you have to be. You're making it up. Some will make it up. 100 earned acts. And you're on your deathbed, and somebody gets a journal, and you get to 99. You've only got 99 good acts. You are one act short. What are you going to do? You're sort of jammed up, aren't you? You're one act short. And you're going to get to heaven and say, God, I did the best I could. I only got to 99. Can you let me in? Is that what you think heaven is? So it's not about being good to get to heaven, but there's a sense in which when I follow Jesus, one of the things Peter says, first thing he says is, add to this faith of yours goodness. Word's used only 4 times in the New Testament. It has to do with an inner character that works itself out. Goodness is more than not doing the wrong thing. Hey, they just don't mess up. It's bigger than that. Goodness is seen in being gracious and beneficial to other people. The word has the connotation that is, I'm out here living life and I'm making chocolate chip cookies. I'm making them for myself and I'm just eating a bunch of chocolate chip cookies. Or I'm making chocolate chip cookies for you. Goodness is learned. You don't think so? How many of you have children? Honestly, ask yourself with your kids, do you have to teach them goodness? Or is it just natural? What is natural? Natural is selfishness. Natural is self-centered. Natural is self-preservation. Natural is seeing myself in the mirror and making it all about me. Why do you have to teach your kids to share? Why can't it just be about them? Wouldn't the world be all better if we were all about ourselves? Seriously, think about it. Like, if you just didn't mess with my world, wouldn't I be happier? Like, don't cut me off in traffic. Don't stab me in the back when I'm trying to get promoted. It's okay if I stab you in the back because you understand I'm trying to get up the ladder. And you're okay, aren't you, if I try and get up the ladder, right? So you got hurt in the process. What's the big deal? Because the world is about me. Except when you see the world about you, and don't we now have a clash? That's what I mean. Paul told Titus, he said, teach people to devote themselves to doing good. Because we won't come by it naturally. The Spirit of God comes in us, we begin to follow Jesus, and he's like, all right, because you're a follower of Jesus, learn to do good. It's both easy to do and it's easy to miss. I showed you a story of a couple people who made chocolate chip cookies today. And here's what you can do in your head. Well, that's no big deal. I mean, it's sweet. It's cute, right? I mean, it's kind of nice, but it's not a big deal, right? Where's my Ferris kids? I just want to do this by. So I got Maddox and Coop, and then Nelson's here, and then Olivia's out there. I'm just curious, someone do the math. How many years has the Ferris clan spent at Zumwalt South High School? So from whoever the youngest is, Olivia, go through, how many years are we talking about with the Ferris clans going through? We got 10 years? 8 years? 8 years? By the time Olivia's done?
Well, 18 in total.
18 total years at Zumwalt South High School. 18 total years at Zumwalt South High School. I have a question for all of you. Where are my Wentzville kids? Wentzville families? A couple of them I know are here. Okay, a couple of Wentzville families. Here's all I want to ask you. Easy to do, easy to miss. 18 years at Zumwalt South. Has there been any rumor, anything at all of anyone for every Monday every Monday of their senior year bringing in cookies for anybody? Doing anything like that for a whole year? Any stories? Over 18 years. Wentzville, any stories? Tell me anything. We estimated that there were probably 5,000 to 6,000 chocolate chip cookies given out her senior year. So let that sink in for a second. It was her idea. Sure, the family pitched in sometimes, but largely Casey drove that bus. And every Sunday afternoon, she'd get the ingredients out because tomorrow was Cookie Monday, and she was going to take cookies for her friends. It is easy to be good to people, and it is easy to miss it. Because you think, what's the big deal? And I just showed you the big deal. Anybody else got a story? We're good at one-off acts of goodness. Usually, we do one act off of goodness when it benefits us. When you think you might get something in return. Even think about it. What are some of the gifts you give? How many of you have not given a gift because someone else didn't give you a gift? Well, they didn't get me a gift last year. They didn't come to my wedding. They didn't come to my shower. They didn't come to my birthday party. They didn't do this for my kid. So therefore, what was the purpose then you were going to give a gift anyways then? Huh? I guess it was to get one back, right? How many of you do things at work? Not because it's the good and right thing to do, but because maybe, just maybe your boss will notice. Maybe someone higher up will take notice. And you'll get a little attaboy. Maybe you'll get promoted. What was your real motivation in doing it? It was to benefit yourself. When we're talking about living a life of goodness, you're talking about being beneficial and helpful to other people because you're a follower of Jesus, not for what you're going to get in return. Can you understand why it's easy to do and easy to miss? Can you understand why it's hard to do? Because it calls that you're going to look outside yourself and you're going to be helpful to the people around you for no other reason that you have a faith in Jesus. I was a couple of verses here. 2 Timothy 3 says, in the last days, And Paul lists a whole bunch of things. One of the things he says, though, that people will not love doing good. I thought that was it. There'll be haters of parents. They'll be lovers of money. They won't be lovers of God. But he says right in there, they won't want to do good. You want one? Okay, so people are mean to us. Why is that a newsflash? Why would they be nice to you? Why do you think? Because you're nice to them? Back to that contractual relationship then, right? You're nice to them so that they'll be nice to you. If they're not nice to you, why would you be nice to them? Paul says they will not love doing good. Acts 10:38 is one of the favorite verses. Could I have you write that down and encourage you to memorize Acts 10:38? Acts 10:38, I love what they said. Have you guys gotten this far in your study of Acts? Travis? Acts 10?
Yeah, we finished that.
Acts 10:38, Peter speaking to them in verse 34, he says, I know and realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism. God doesn't play favorites. He accepts men from every nation who fear him and do what is right. You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, telling the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. Now I'm going to jump to verse 38. How God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit. He empowered him with power. And how, I love this, he went about doing good and healing. Hey, tell me about Jesus. You know what Jesus did? He was helping people out, and he went about doing the right thing. He was filled with the Spirit of God. He was doing good. He was helping people. What should be the mark of Stonebridge? That we'd be a church that was full of God, and we went about doing good and helping people. Why do we open a parking lot up for someone to shoot off fireworks? Why do we do foam day? Why do we have VBS? Why are we going to do a back-to-school bash in August? So that we might be a place that goes about doing good and helping people. Why should you participate in these things? So that you could be known as a person who goes about doing good and helping people. It won't come naturally. Your spirit will fight against it. You'll feel like a sucker. You know how I know that? If I use the phrase, goody two-shoes. Have you heard that expression? What does the phrase goody two-shoes mean? You know? What would you say? What's the connotation? My words, they're brown nose. My words, they're like, play up to people. Like, come on, nobody wants to be a goody two-shoes, right? It's not a compliment, right? Comes from a children's story of a little girl who only had one shoe. Apparently, a wealthy man gave her a second shoe. She had a pair. She lived the rest of her days in gratitude because she had two shoes and not one. She was known as goody two-shoes. Is that a bad thing? I don't know, you tell me. How did it become a derogatory thing? Why is goodness seen as a negative? Second observation I want to leave you with is you and I were created to do good. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, for by grace you've been saved through faith. It's not from yourselves, it's the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. It's not about what I do, so that therefore you can't brag. Really think about it. Could you imagine heaven? Hey, how'd you get here? Well, I did. Oh, yeah, let me tell you about what I did. And we spend heaven and eternity talking about how good we are. Wouldn't that be cool? Just sitting around campfires, rehearsing stories of your goodness and my goodness and how cool we were. Right? It's not of works, lest none of us brag. It's by faith. It's a gift by God. We have a birthday party this afternoon for my son Joe. He's going to get gifts. He's not going to write a check for him. We're not going to make him jump through hoops. He's part of the family. We're giving gifts. Isn't that what you do? It's a gift of God. For this reason. Hang on. Next slide. For we are his workmanship. Figures, right? For we as workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. God's desire for you is that you live a life doing good. Don't go looking for some secret will of God. What's his purpose for me? You know what his purpose for you is? When you walk out of here, how will you treat people? Any of you in the service industry, I'm going to make a statement, I'm just curious. Well, as a nurse, any of you like wait staff at restaurants? Have you been wait staff at restaurants? One of my understandings is Sunday afternoons are the worst times. I got a thumbs up back there. Yeah, another thumbs up back there. Why are Sunday afternoons the worst times for wait staff? Because Christians go eat. And we are the worst tippers. And sometimes we're the rudest people. And that just cranks me. Why is that? Why are the people who have been shown the most mercy and the most grace the rudest and the cheapest? You want to go about doing good? Leave a good tip. You want to go about doing good? Say thank you when someone serves you, waits on you. You want to do good? You see someone needs help? Hey, can I give you a hand? You want to do good? What are these? Well, they're cookies, Mike, with smiley faces. Aren't they cute? They're really cool. They're sugar cookies. Somebody like one? Nothing on them? And you guys want a cookie? They're legit. I just opened them. They're not poison. Totally serious. Alex Simmons, will you stand up? Alex. Hey, if I call my kids out, you better believe I'll call you out. See that young man right there? Twice a month, he bakes and brings in snacks that you eat. Are you sit down now? He'll stand all day if I don't tell him to sit down. What's the big deal? Because it's easy to do and easy to miss. I got a high school kid twice a month bringing in snacks for us to enjoy. Alex, can I ask you a question? Do your parents make you do it? I just shot that one to pieces. Yeah, thanks, Alex. A theologian said, how do I find opportunities to do good? And he said, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. What he's saying is, how has God wired you? Where are needs that are out there? What connects with you? And get yourself there. There's some people that stepped up to do middle school ministry because they care about middle school kids. They could do something, offer a class, gather them together, see if we can get a group. Same with high school. They're not paid. They're not doing it because they're getting a check. They're doing it because maybe God would use them. You were created to do good. You want to know what your purpose in life is? Seriously? I'm going to tell you. You can write it down. You were created to do good things. Where? Right where you are. There's a guy from a church that was a builder. He went on a mission trip to rebuild homes after a tornado that went through Alabama. Once he got there, the story goes, he was so fascinated by helping other people that he began to transition himself so that he could spend more time helping people in his skill of building homes who had been ravaged by a storm. There was a woman that cared about moms who were single, and she began to volunteer at an organization, and before long, that's what consumed her, was her passion to help women who had needs as single moms and give herself to that cause. There was a guy who tells the story of a boss who decided he had 6 people under him. They were all in the same building, but they never met. He decided he was going to spend his time and once a week go in and talk to each of his employees. And so let's call him Steve. Steve went into Joe at one point and said to Joe, hey man, I just really appreciate you get your work done. Your information's good, it's accurate, I'm able to take it up the ladder. I just want to thank you. Thanks for being a good guy and for being a steady worker, and I really appreciate you. As Steve tells the story, about a month later, Joe came in with an Xbox. And he said, I want to give this to you for your birthday. And Steve's like, man, you didn't have to do that. He said, no, I want to. I want to tell you a story. He said, my mom died. I've been dealing with all of that. And pretty much because we were tight, I lost a kind of an interest in living. He said, I got to a spot where I would go home and every night I would pick up ramen noodles. I would have ramen noodles. He said, I would put on Nirvana and I would take out my handgun and I would ask myself if tonight's the night. He said, I lived that way for about 4 to 5 weeks. He said, then one day you came in and you told me how much you appreciate me. And you told me how valuable I was to the team. I went out that night and I sold the gun to a pawn shop. And I heard you talk about gaming, and I took the money from the sale of the handgun and I bought an Xbox. You helped me live. What was Steve's purpose? Just going to a coworker and saying, thanks, I appreciate you. You don't know the power that you have with your words to transform and change a life. But you got to see people. The last thing I want us to understand is, why does doing good matter? Because I think this is significant. This is the why would I spend this much energy telling you about this. I wrote down 4 reasons. If you want to write them down, here we go. Why does doing good matter? On one level, it helps other people. It actually meets practical needs. A guy goes into Birmingham, Alabama, and replaces homes for people. That meets the needs that people have. You help people. It's not just maybe helping somebody across the street with their groceries, but that might be it. But it also might be befriending someone that is really like beaten up, and you're just encouraging them. Might be giving someone skills they need. Might be in ministry here, the classes. It might be making snacks so that your belly gets filled. You help people. We need to understand, when I say this, keep doing good even when it's hard, for God will reward you at the proper time. That comes out of Galatians 6, 9, and 10. God's going to reward your goodness. God will not be in debt to you. You won't be able to look the Father in the eye and say, hey, I did more than you. I believe that God will reward you. God will, what will that reward look like? I don't know. Would it be someone saying to you, you saved my life? Would the reward be your family is in a better spot because you chose a life of pursuing the helping and doing good, and so your family benefits? I know that God won't shortchange you. I thought the third thing, why it matters, because doing good does good to you. They've done the studies. It's called Helper's High. When you help people from a strictly, let's just say, non-Christian, non-Jesus way, you feel better about yourself. They say that stress hormones reduce in your body. They say that the hormones that make you feel better about life, boom, jump, all because you're helpful to people. You want to feel better about yourself? Some of you don't like yourself. You want to feel better about yourself? Get your eyes off yourself and start looking at other people. I promise you, you will see a change in your attitude. Fourth thing is, I said here that it pushes back against evil. What do I mean by that? I think that when we do good, we say to the adversary, you will not win in my lifetime. I'm going to do what God gives me to do to help people feel whole and benefit. I heard the story of a guy and his son. His college son was at odds. Christian man, son grew up in a Christian home, but the son was pushing back against it. Let me read you the story that NPR told. It was on the episode Know When to Fold 'Em. David was a 28-year-old, hostile to his father's faith. Here's what David said. I had all this ammunition and I couldn't wait to use it on my dad. I remember thinking this is showdown because my dad and I were at war. My dad didn't know it, but I was at war with him. I was at war with all Christians, and I was just waiting for an excuse to have a shot at my dad. So when my dad innocently mentioned some mission work he'd been praying about, I lashed out at him. I rambled on and on. I knew essentially while I was doing this, I was also assaulting his dream. I was trying to pour water on something he was excited about, and he was just sharing with me. He just quietly let me do my thing. David's father says here, let him expend every round of ammunition without arguing or retreating. He simply looked at David and said, David, catch this. Your son just blasted you. Here's Dad's response. David, I'm really proud of everything you've done. David concludes by saying, I remember looking at my dad and I thought, I had sort of expected an argument. You know, I didn't really expect to win, but I wanted to come with some sort of like, I'm going to get him. I hadn't expected to lose completely because you can't argue with decency. You can't argue with goodness. Team's coming up. That last point, just so those of you that do keep track of it, doing good shines a spotlight on Jesus. When we do good, we make Jesus the focal point, because that's why we do it. The guy was in the hospital having surgery. It's a pretty popular dude. He had a dozen or so arrangements in his hospital room. Nurse came in and said, hey, Mr. Jones, we've got a woman on this floor that's dying slowly. No one's coming to see her. She's got nothing in her room. Would you mind if we took one of your plants? Now, he was a type A charging kind of guy, but it spoke to him, and he picked out the best plant he had in his room, one worth a couple $100 from some friends of his. He said, take her that one. And so that's what the nurse did, took the best plant down, gave it to the woman who was dying. He writes that about a half hour later, the nurse came back into his room and squeezed his big toe and looked him in the eye and said, we did something good today. That's all she said. Took and gave a plant to a dying woman because he had a dozen in his room. We did something good today. And you know what he wrote? He said, you know, I wish I could live every day with a sense that God would squeeze my toe and said, we did something good today. What's the next good thing you can do? You're going to walk out of here, you're going to live life this week. What's the next good thing you can do? What if no one sees? God sees. Isn't that enough? What if they don't appreciate it? Did you do it for them? Did you do it for Him? I'm being straight as best I can. This is where I've come to. This is where I'm living life. I don't care if you see it. I don't care if you appreciate it. Because I didn't do it for you. Why do you serve? So that the pastor notices, so Sherry notices. So. Is that why you serve? Then you got your reward. I don't do it for you. I don't show up for you. I show up for Him. He sees. And the God who sees in secret promises to reward you. What's the next good thing you can do? Will you do it? Let's stand together and sing with these guys.